Love it. You guys ready for a Bible study? That's what we do at Calvary Chapel, right? All right, so before I even tell you where to turn, I have a question for you. And that question is, if you were a superhero, what superpower would you have? As you can imagine, I've given this some thought, right? Like I thought through it before I asked you the question. Only I can't decide. I mean, do I want super strength? Do I want invisibility? Do I want flight? There's like so many great things to pick from. But then there are other things too, right? Well, the costume. I'd want like a really cool emblem on my chest. I'd want a super cool helmet or mask, maybe both. That'd be fun, right? And then there's like the secret identity to think through. Something like Peter Parker, not so much. Bruce Wayne, maybe. Tony Stark, that's what I'm talking about. And then, of course, don't forget like a base or a headquarters, your very own bat cave or fortress of solitude. How awesome would that be? I was into superheroes when I was a kid. Was anyone here into superheroes when they were a kid? Yeah, maybe still a little bit, maybe more than a little bit. So I was, and I would read like superhero comic books, and sometimes I would watch superhero cartoons on TV, and sometimes, if I'm keeping it real, sometimes I would pretend that I was a superhero. Now, kids today have got it made. I mean, for real, like when we spend, 6+ months on the road every year, our 12-year-old, she passes many miles, many hours with her iPad. And this is why I say kids today have got it made, because between their cell phones and their tablets and their gaming systems, they're never more than one click away from being able to pretend to be anyone they want to be or to do anything they want to do, right? When I was a kid, if I wanted to play superhero, Mom did not hand me an iPad. She handed me a tattered old bath towel and a safety pin. Wrap that towel around my shoulders, and Mom would help me get it pinned up close, and hours of fun would follow. Now, kids today would get like 5 minutes out of that. The first 4 would be spent complaining about how lame it was, but we could make it work all day long, right? Isn't it true, though, that even as adults, there's something inside of us that wants to be heroic, that wants to do something heroic, that wants to live heroically? That's what we're going to talk about today. So let's turn in our Bibles to Joshua chapter 2. There we're going to meet a woman who was totally a hero. Like she did something so heroic. She learned to live her life in a heroic way. And from her life, we're going to learn 3 things that we can do if we too are going to live heroically. So even as you're settling into your place there in Joshua chapter 2, I'm just going to pray one last time and ask, Father, that you would speak to us through this ancient story. Lord, I love that we open our Bibles knowing that these stories actually took place. These are real places, real people, but knowing too that as long ago as this story happened, you are here in this moment, in this place, Lord, and you are wanting to speak into our lives. You're wanting to do a work for your glory and for our good. We ask you to do that. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Now, I'm just going to tell you right up front that we're going to start super slow and end super fast. We want to do some backstory, so don't panic when it seems like we're moving so slowly that I won't be done till midnight. I promise I'll be done on time. But our first point is this: if you and I are going to live heroically, we have to let go of the past. So check out verse 1. That's all we're going to get for the first point. Verse 1. Now Joshua the son of Nun sent out 2 men from Acacia Grove to spy secretly, saying, "Go, view the land, especially Jericho." So they went, and they came to the house of a harlot named Rahab, and they lodged there. Now this is a generation after the Exodus. If you haven't read the book, you've seen the movie, right? The 10 Commandments. Maybe you went the animated route. Maybe you saw the Prince of Egypt. Either way, this story takes place right after that story. So what's happening is that Joshua has succeeded Moses. The people are they've crossed the river, they're ready to conquer the land. Like all of this is happening. And they come to this place called Acacia Grove. At least that's what it's called in the New King James Version. Now, if that place name sounds familiar, it totally should. It was there in Acacia Grove that the men of Israel, just a generation before, the men of Israel, their fathers were seduced by the women of Moab. And so long story short, as a result of their unfaithfulness to God and their unfaithfulness to their families, 24,000 people died. I mean, that means that there were some people who went forward without a husband. There were others who went forward without a father or a son. There were others who went forward without a brother. And you know that every single year on an anniversary, they'd be reminded, right? Every year on a birthday, they'd be reminded. And you know for sure as they gathered in this place where all of these things happened not so long before, they would be reminded about how the choices of one generation affect the next. It makes me think about how I've been affected by the choices that my parents made. And it challenges me to think about how the choices that I'm making affect my daughters, my adult daughter, our daughter still at home, and even our granddaughter that we told you about. Like how are my choices today going to affect her tomorrow? Maybe your family isn't so different from mine, by which I mean like your family of origin. Has there been something in your family, something harmful, something hurtful that has gone on like way too long, like maybe generation after generation, that sort of thing? In my family, that thing has been alcoholism. My dad was an alcoholic. Were he here this morning in this service, he probably would refer to himself as a recovering alcoholic, just because that's the language that lots of people use today. But I'm so happy to tell you that my dad's been sober now for many years. Now, please understand, not before he lost his marriage to my mother, and not before he very nearly lost his second marriage. But to see the way my dad has put his life back together is an amazing thing. Like his life is so much better since he got sober. I'm really proud of him. But it wasn't even just my dad, it was his dad. My grandfather was an alcoholic. Now, I'm guessing you guys are like me in that when you talk about a loved one, especially a loved one who's already passed, don't you try to see them in your mind? Don't you picture them the way you remember them? Only I have to be honest and say that I'm struggling even now to do that. Like, I could probably count on one hand the number of times I saw my grandfather in my whole life. And not for lack of opportunity. I know that many of you may have never known your grandfather, but my grandfather lived well into my adult life. And I should have lots and lots of happy memories of time spent with Grandpa. Instead, right now I'm at a loss to create his face in my mind, in my imagination. You see, he and my grandmother were married and divorced twice to each other. They were married, they got divorced, they tried again, they failed again. And no doubt, as was the case with my own parents, so too with my grandparents, the alcoholism was a major contributing factor to the failure of that relationship. It's not too hard to figure out what that meant for my dad. For my dad, that meant growing up largely without a father figure. And it meant growing up largely in poverty, too. My dad and his brothers, my uncles, lived with their mother, my grandmother, who lived with her own mother, my great-grandmother, in public housing in San Bernardino, California, the projects known as Waterman Gardens. And you know that had to affect the way that my dad raised me and my sister Cheryl. It's been some years now since my grandfather passed. I was still pastoring Calvary Austin at the time. I remember that much about when exactly he passed because soon after, like 2 months after, I was in California for our annual pastors conference. Brian will tell you that, for decades now, Calvary Chapel pastors from across the country and even from around the world have gathered for this annual conference. And so I would regularly attend that conference. And oftentimes, flying from Austin to Southern California, I would stick around a day or two afterwards to visit my dad in Orange County. So there I am in my dad's house, like 2 months after he's buried his own father, and he's telling me what it was like for him to travel to Stockton, where my grandfather had spent his final years. What it was like to enter his house. What it was like to sort through his personal belongings. And just then he asked me if I would wait right there while he got up and went to the other room. When he came back, he was carrying a box. Now, I want to talk about this box for a minute because I have one like it, and I'm guessing that many of you do too. Do you have a box, a special place? I mean, it could even be a drawer, but a place where you put like keepsakes, mementos, the sorts of things that you just sort of collect over a lifetime and often take with you as you move from one place to another. Do you have a box like that? Anybody relate to that? So I have one. It's a little wooden box. It says San Diego on the front. I got it as a kid on a trip to San Diego, and inside that box are like my high school class ring, some coins I've gathered in travels to other countries, some cool rocks, and I think over time maybe some knickknacks and odds and ends have made their way in there. I have to admit, I haven't seen this box in almost 4 years. It's in a storage unit outside Austin, Texas. And one of these days, maybe in the not too distant future, I'll get to see that box again. Maybe I'll get to lay eyes on that box. But so you can relate, you have a box like that. So Grandpa had one of these boxes. And my dad, he took the lid off the box and he started moving things around inside and then taking things out. And he took out a document. And this document was a certificate of divorce. I don't remember now whether it was from their first divorce or their second. I want to say it was their second. And he reached back in and he took out a picture of my Uncle Bill on my grandfather's knee when Bill was a baby. Bill was later killed in action in Vietnam. And then my dad reached back in that box. No joke, he took out my kindergarten picture and my first grade picture and my second grade picture. I was blown away. My mom did like moms have done forever. When the school pics came home, she cut out the little wallet-sized ones, mail them off to loved ones wherever they might be. And so there they were in this box. Like, even though I can barely remember my grandfather's face, he thought that my face had a place in his box. Now, I felt conflicted about that, and I still do. There's a part of me that feels really, really good that I made Grandpa's box. And there's another part of me that feels really, really bad. And that's the part of me that realizes that whereas my box, and probably your box too, is a box filled with memories, his was a box filled with regrets. His was a box filled with reminders of all the things that he'd had but lost. Not all of them his own fault, but many of them his own fault. It was filled with reminders of things that he might have enjoyed right up until the end of his life, but instead didn't get to enjoy at all. And so whether we're talking about my grandfather's story or whether we're talking about the backstory to Joshua chapter 2, it's a reminder that there has to come a time in our lives when we say enough is enough. That it doesn't matter what has happened in our families or for how long, that we get to say it stops here, it stops now, it stops with this generation, it stops with me. Can you feel the mood in Acacia Grove? And it wasn't even just that. There's another throwback. Did you notice the reference to the spies? Now, Joshua sent 2 spies, but Moses, the generation before, had sent 12. And if you know the story, you know that 10 of those spies came back with a negative report. 10 of those spies were like, there's no way. There's no way we can do this. I don't care who God says we are. I don't care what God says we can do. There's no way. We shouldn't even try this. And then there were 2 spies. One of them was Joshua, of course, who came back and said, oh, we so got this. Like, we are exactly who God says we are. We can do exactly what God says we can do. Why in the world are we wasting time having this argument? Why are we not taking the land right now? Come on, let's go. Sadly, as is often the case, even in a community of faith like a local church, the negative voices carried the day. And as a result, an entire generation was doomed to die in the wilderness. Their sentence, 40 years with time served. For the best part of 40 years, they were going to wander through the desert, waiting for everyone of a certain age to die. That's a lot of funerals. In fact, we can do the math. If there were 1.2 million adults, which is considered a conservative estimate, and if they spent every single hour of daylight burying people, we're talking about funeral after funeral. A lot of funerals, like year after year, month after month, week after week, day after day, about 7 or 8 times per hour they were burying someone for 40 years. And you know that every single time another body slid beneath the sand, they would be reminded about what happens when we listen to the wrong voices. What happens when we listen to anyone who says anything other than what God says about who we are and about what we can do. Has that been your experience? As we travel the country, we meet people everywhere who can relate to this. And some people even tell us that, it's a lifelong thing, for as long as they can remember, this is how it's been for them, being beat down by the negative words of other people. Like for you, it could have been a parent or a sibling. It might have been a teacher or a coach. It could have been a Sunday school teacher or a youth group leader. In your adult life, it could be someone that you work with or for. It could even be your spouse. But you can hardly remember a day that you weren't beat down by this negative message about you that is at odds with what God says about you. And if that's been your experience, I am so sorry. It can be so difficult for a person to overcome that in their lives. Isn't it true, though, that even for those of us who may not relate to that, at least as like a lifelong kind of a struggle or issue, isn't it true that for all of us, the biggest struggle that we have isn't with the story that they tell us about us, but with the story that we tell ourselves? You know that little voice in your head that says, I'm not enough. I'm not handsome enough. I'm not beautiful enough. I'm not tall enough. I'm not thin enough. You know, I'm not intelligent enough. I'm not athletic enough. I'm not educated enough. I'm not trained enough. I'm not cool enough. I'm not sophisticated enough. I'm not spiritual enough. I'm not good enough. Guys, this is one more of those things where there has to come a time in our lives when we say enough is enough. That going forward, we're not going to listen to anyone, even if it's us. We're not going to listen to anyone who says anything other than what God says about who we are or about what we can do. Can you feel the mood in Acacia Grove? And so with that backstory, we rejoin the narrative. These spies were sent to gather intelligence. Notice it says especially of a place called Jericho. Now, if you go home and Google Jericho, one of the very top hits is going to tell you that the modern city claims to be the oldest continuously inhabited city in the world. That's an interesting thing, right? I mean, that would be an interesting thing to talk about, to kick around, maybe to debate a little bit. But, obviously, what we're most interested in is what Jericho was like in ancient times. So what was it like when our story takes place? Maybe the first thing you need to know about Jericho is that it was heavily fortified with not one but two walls. So, I don't know how long the shutdown lasted, but eventually the king of Jericho built two walls. I don't know. I'm not really sure what was happening with that. Whatever you think of walls in modern times, and I'm perfectly happy for you to have no idea what I think about that. In ancient times, it really was a matter of security. I mean, in ancient Jericho, a wall was the difference between a good night's sleep and getting killed in your sleep. Your wife raped, your kids taken as slaves. I mean, that's what it was like in the ancient world. That's what it was like to live in Jericho when Rahab lived there. So what would happen, though, if having built a wall, you ran out of room? Then you build another wall. So picture a second larger concentric circle. And the space between the walls? Suburbs. You've got old Jericho and new Jericho. Now file that away because we're going to come back to it, but no sooner did the spies' feet hit the ground in Jericho than they're found in the red light district. What? I mean, come on. If you were new to the Bible, would you see that coming? There's no way you would go for the page turn and be like, I know where they're going to be when I turn the page. There's no way. In a split second, we've gone from talking about the world's oldest city to talking about the world's oldest profession. It's like, how did we get here? Maybe we should stop and just talk about that for one moment. I don't believe that the spies were at Rahab's place to get under the covers. I believe they were there undercover. The success of their mission depended upon not drawing attention to themselves. So, as they traveled to Jericho that day, they likely joined or were joined by other people traveling to Jericho. These guys didn't tunnel under the city walls. They walked right through open gates. They followed the flow of traffic to those parts of the city where tourists would go. But maybe we shouldn't be too quick to dismiss the value that they might have placed in Rahab as a potential intelligence asset. Think of it. There's no telling who she knew or what. It was reasonable for them to think that she might have access to information that no one else they were going to get to talk with would have access to. To me, it makes perfect sense that they would want to talk to Rahab. And if there was anything inappropriate about their visit to Rahab's house, the Bible doesn't tell us so. But don't you love that the Bible tells us the truth about Rahab? Man, I love that so much, and for so many reasons. That could be like a whole sermon in itself. I'm going to just highlight one little thing and then move on. I love it because today we talk so much in the church about things like authenticity, transparency, vulnerability, and like so many other things we talk about at church, we are way better at talking about it than we are at doing it. right? Like if you've been doing church for long, if like me, you've had multiple churches, over a lifetime, you're going to know where I'm going with this, because you too were at some point, someplace when someone got brave. They found their voice. They told their story like Miranda did this morning. Or maybe they opened up and admitted to, an area where they were struggling. Maybe they were, honest enough to admit that they have some doubts about something that maybe everyone else in the group just takes for granted. And then you watched in horror as the people around them shamed them, shushed them, and ultimately shunned them. And you learned quickly that church is not always a safe place to keep it real, no matter what they say. But shouldn't it be? And again, if you were new to all of this, wouldn't you think that it would be? Like if I were new to the Bible, if I were new to faith, if I were new to church and to Christianity, and I fell upon this story, I would be thinking to myself, thank goodness, I have finally found myself in a place where I can keep it real. The hero of this story is a prostitute. I can be me. I can tell my story. This is a place where I can let my hair down, so to speak. Now, I'm so glad that you guys are in a church that values as a distinctive part of its culture grace. What if we were all someplace later, at some future time, we all found ourselves together in a place where that wasn't the case? Would we have to wait for somebody at the top to figure it out and fix it? No way. We could fix it bottom up. We could fix it grassroots. You know how? If we all agreed to do two things. Number one, we all agreed to tell our stories. And number two, we all agreed that when it was the next person's turn, we absolutely would not shame, shush, or shun them. If we all got on the same page doing those two things, man, we could transform culture wherever we found ourselves. Now, in fairness to Rahab, she may have done what she did as a matter of survival. Am I saying that what Rahab did was okay? No, of course not. It was totally not okay. Just like so many things that I've done are totally not okay. But let's take a minute to put ourselves in her place. Man, it was really, really hard for women in the ancient world. If you were a woman in the ancient world and you weren't married, and if you didn't have family helping provide for your physical, material needs, you were in a struggle just to survive. For someone like Rahab, it's not like she could just put on her career hat and reinvent herself. She couldn't just join LinkedIn and start networking. It wasn't like that in the ancient world. And so part of what I'm getting at is that seriously, however upsetting it is for us to learn this about her, it's not half as upsetting as it was for her to live it. And not only that, but aren't we learning that life is so much better when we take even 5 minutes to put ourselves in someone else's shoes before we decide that they don't matter, that they don't count, or even that we know everything there is to know about what they're doing or why they're doing it, because we don't. Could Rahab live heroically? Well, not unless she let go of her past. Think of all the guilt from her past. Think of all the guys, all the hookups. Do you have a past? Are there skeletons in your closet? The truth is we've all done things that we're ashamed of, that we're embarrassed by, that we feel guilty about. But you know that one of the biggest mistakes that we can make in life is to allow guilt from a forgiven past to rob us of the future that God has for us. And you know why we do that? We do that because we don't get forgiveness. I don't mean that we haven't received it, right? As a follower of Christ, you know that you've received it. What I mean is we don't get it in the sense that we can't wrap our minds around it. Like we struggle to really believe that God forgives. Or as we sometimes say, that He forgives and forgets. If the Bible doesn't say that explicitly, it certainly says it repeatedly, implicitly. Let me just throw out one example, okay? Just one. And that is that Bible verse. You guys know the one where it talks about God dumping our sin into the sea? Man, I love that verse. In fact, I want to give you a visual on that verse right now. Like right now as I'm speaking, I want you to imagine that God is rounding up all of my sin. That's right. Every sin that Alan Rigg has ever committed, He's rounding it up. You guys should totally get comfortable because this could take a while. We're waiting. It's awkward, I know. It's my sin. Okay, He's got it. Now, He's dumping my sin into the Mediterranean Sea. I want you to picture the storm surge. Like beaches all around the Mediterranean are disappearing. Coastal cities are filling with water as my sin sinks into the deep, dark depths of the Mediterranean in a field of bubbles, only finally hits the seafloor, sending silt in every direction that slowly settles until no one can see my sin or even find it. And God himself isn't going to dredge it up because he promises not to. Wow. Well, with that visual in mind, do you think there could ever come a time in my life or in yours when, again, we're allowing guilt from a forgiven past to rob us of the future that God has for us, that God might look at us and say, I'm over it, why aren't you? Have you allowed a handful of guilty memories to control you, to define you, to tell you who you are? You know, those things you feel guilty about, they're a part of your story, but they're not the whole story. God is still writing your story. And this is one more of those things where we get to say, enough is enough. Going forward, I'm not going to live from this guilty place anymore. I'm going to live from this forgiven place instead. But it wasn't even just the guilt from her past. I think there was hurt from her past too. We're going to learn in a moment that she did in fact have family in Jericho. So is this conjecture on my part? Of course it is. But is it not at least possible? If she had family in Jericho, and as best we can tell, they were not helping meet her physical, material, financial needs, is it not at least possible if she had family there who were doing nothing to rescue her from this lifestyle that she was stuck in? Is it not at least possible that they'd had a falling out? That she was hurt, that they were hurt, that there was more than enough hurt to go around? There usually is. Have you been hurt? Like if you were keeping it real, would you have to admit that in your life there is this undercurrent of anger, of bitterness, of resentment? I mean, the truth is we've all been hurt. And you know why hurt from our past robs us of the future that God has for us? Because we don't give forgiveness. So guilt robs us because we don't get forgiveness. Hurt robs us because we don't give it. Here's what we do. You guys know that saying, hurt people, hurt people? You've heard that, right? It's so true. This is what you and me, this is what we do. When we're hurt, this is our posture. No. I'm not going to forgive you. You owe me. You owe it to me to be miserable for a really long time. You owe it to me to be miserable for the rest of your life. It gets so bad that we're laying in bed at night wide awake. We're not counting sheep. We're telling ourselves stories like this one, I hope I never see them again. Well, what if I did? What if I saw them? What if I saw them out and I know I could act like I don't even know them? That'd be good. Well, no, because I got these zingers I've been working on, so I'd have to approach them. So I'd go up to them, and I'd say this, and they'd be speechless. It'd be awesome. Well, no, because I got more zingers I've been working on, so they'd have to respond. So I'd say this, and they'd say that, and it'd be really stupid, and then I'd say this. Meanwhile, here they are at home. I mean, they don't even know we're thinking that stuff. Or worse, they know, and they totally do not care. This is why we say that forgiveness is a gift that we give ourselves. When I forgive that person who's hurt me, it effectively ends any control that they have over my life. Now, if you've been hurt recently or deeply, I know what you're thinking. I can read it like a thought bubble over your head. Who is this guy and who invited him? It can be hurtful, even offensive, right? To be told that you're supposed to forgive. Like I can imagine the pushback, you don't know them, you don't know what they did, you don't know how it hurt. Maybe it would help if I differentiated between two things. There's a world of difference between forgiveness and reconciliation. I'm talking about forgiveness. Reconciliation takes two. For that reason alone, it isn't always possible. Now, you'll hear that in church. Can I add something you may not hear as often in church? This is like the director's cut. This is when you buy the DVD and it's got the deleted scenes. You ready for this? Not only is reconciliation not always possible, but it isn't always, not in every single last situation, desirable. Take my dad as an example. For someone in recovery, there are people that person in recovery just doesn't ever need to be around if they're going to maintain their sobriety. Or take Miranda's story as an example. For my wife and for our daughter, reconciliation would not have been safe. But while it takes two to reconcile, it takes one to forgive. You can, I can, all by ourselves decide to let go of past hurt. Yeah, but Alan, if I forgive them, I'm saying that what they did wasn't wrong. I'm saying that what they did didn't hurt. You'd be saying no such thing. You know what you would be saying? You'd be saying what you did was wrong and what you did hurt, but holding this relational IOU over your head is tearing me up, so I'm tearing it up. I refuse to lose even one more day of my life to this feeling of angst that I have had 24/7, 365 for longer than I care to admit. So I'm letting go of the past. Have you allowed a handful of hurtful memories to control your life, to define you, to tell you who you are? Those things that hurt you, they're a part of your story. They're not your whole story. God is still writing your story. And it's one more of those things where we get to say, enough is enough. Going forward, I'm not going to live from this hurt place anymore. I'm going to live from this forgiving place instead. And so if we're going to live heroically, we have to let go of the past. The second thing we need to do is face our fears. Let's take verses 2 to 7. See, now we're accelerating. Now we're pressing the gas. It was told the king of Jericho, saying, behold, men have come here tonight from the children of Israel to search out the country. So the king of Jericho sent to Rahab, saying, bring out the men who have come to you, who have entered your house, for they have come to search out all the country. And then the woman took the 2 men and hid them. So she said, yes, the men came to me, but I did not know where they were from. And it happened as the gate was being shut when it was dark that the men went out. Where the men went, I do not know. Pursue them quickly, for you may overtake them. But she had brought them up to the roof and hidden them with the stalks of flax, which she had laid in order on the roof. Then the men pursued them by the road to the Jordan to the fords. And as soon as those who pursued them had gone out, they shut the gate. So the spies, apparently they've been followed, they've been found out. Could Rahab live heroically? Well, not unless she faced her fears. Now, the thing about fear is it's so universal, right? Like, everybody can relate to this on some level. Have you guys ever seen that website, phobialist.com? You'll have to check it out, like when you get home. They have cataloged over 500 phobias on this website. It's like you're scared of stuff you hadn't even thought of yet. It's crazy. Is anybody here afraid of heights? Yeah, so you're not even lifting your hand all the way up over your head, because that would be like too far off the ground. Does anybody have like an unnatural fear of needles? Like nobody likes a shot or a blood draw, but for you that's a really bad day. Yeah, you got your flu shots, right, and your arm still hurts, and you're like, I can't even raise my hand to tell you how much I hate that. Okay, what about this? What about like people who have an unnatural fear of spiders? Like for you, that's the real home invasion. There's a spider anywhere in the house. Okay, and who's just afraid to raise their hand in public? Anybody? All right. You pass, you pass, you pass. I can see through the glass that there are things to eat and drink in the lobby. You guys should go enjoy. Rest of us have more work to do. Like fear is so powerful. Have you ever been so scared that you did something you wouldn't normally do? Totally done that. Or have you ever been so scared that you didn't do something you normally would do? I've totally done that too. So powerful fear is. And maybe that's why the most common command in the Bible is do not be afraid. Did you know that? There's a lot of do's and don'ts in the Bible, but the one that far and above occurs the most frequently is do not be afraid. Now we're going to double back to that, but first this timeline that I've sort of been creating, been talking about guilt and hurt as if they're over here in our past, right? And fear we would usually think of as being over here in our future. We're afraid this is going to happen. We're afraid that's not going to happen. Don't make the mistake of thinking these things are disconnected. They're not. They're totally connected. You know what I'm learning? I'm learning that in life, if I don't make peace with the past, I will almost always fear the future. And Rahab, she had every reason to be afraid. She was about to risk her life to hide the spies and to lie for them, which raises an ethical issue, right? Like I thought we weren't supposed to lie. I thought we were supposed to tell the truth. Is this the right thing to do, the wrong thing to do? Are you guys interested in my take? See, if I just gloss over it when you leave, you'd be like, yeah, Rigg guy was okay, but he's a chicken. I mean, he didn't even... So what if I just give you a real quick take? Personally, I would compare what Rahab did to what people in Europe during World War II did. People who took Jews into their homes and hid them. And then if Nazi soldiers came pounding on the door, demanding to know whether Jews were present, they lied. They said no. They chose life-saving over truth-telling when it wasn't possible to do both. To put it in ethical terms, two moral absolutes came into unavoidable conflict, and they chose the greater good, I believe, without guilt. It's what Norman Geisler calls graded absolutism. So that's how I feel about what they did in Europe during World War II. That's how I feel about what Rahab did. We can disagree about this and be friends, but at least I gave you something to argue about over lunch, right? You're welcome. So check it out. She could have played it safe, but think of the regret that she might have had. I mean, have you ever played it safe only to regret it later? Of course you have. Remember that time you struck out looking? All these years later, you're still like, oh, if only I'd taken a cut at that pitch. What about that time you knew the answer, but you could not get your voice to come out of your throat? Or that time that you wanted to volunteer, but you couldn't get your hand up over your head? What about the time you couldn't decide about the house or the car and somebody else got it? Or that other time, you know the one. You were so close, like crazy close, to telling someone how you really felt about them. But you chickened out. Maybe you never had another chance. Rahab, she could have played it safe. She could have refused to hide the spies. She could have refused to lie for them. Instead, she risked the life that she had, the only life that she knew, for the life that she wanted. To live heroically, you always have to risk your life as it is. And that is so scary, which is why we're talking about facing our fears. It's an amazing thing for us to think through. To live heroically, you have to risk your life as it is. Are you prepared to do that? Are you prepared to risk your life as it is? Now, so you could be listening to this, and again, the pushback, you could be like, well, Alan, it sounds like you're talking about risk-taking. Do I look like a risk-taker to you? Is that what you're thinking? Are you one of the many people who describe yourself as having a low risk tolerance, or maybe even no risk tolerance at all? I'm not buying it. I was in a bookstore not that long ago. You guys remember those, right? They had shelves. These things with pages. I loved them, man. They were like one of my favorite stops. And so I took this book off the shelf and I'm looking at the title. The title is The 100 Most Dangerous Things in Everyday Life and What to Do About Them. Do not read that book. I'm serious. That book, it wrecked my mind. So check this out. I did not know that every year in the United States, more people are killed by teddy bears than by grizzly bears. Who knew? Like a button can come off. You can have a choking incident. Did you know that every year in the United States, 40,000 people are injured by their television set? It sounds weird, right? Until you stop and think about it. Because Miranda and I, many times we've been watching AFV, America's Funniest Videos, seen some kids roughhousing rolling across the room, and they roll into a piece of furniture that starts to wobble. A TV tumbles off, you can have a crushing injury. Against my better judgment, I'm going to share one more example. You ready for this? Did you know that every year in the United States, 60,000 people are injured using the toilet? Right? So don't tell me you're not a risk taker. Unless you're prepared to hold it for a really long time, like forever. I mean, the question isn't whether to risk. We obviously take risks every day. But the question is what to risk. So will you risk the life that you have for the life that you want, the one that God wants for you? Or are you going to put at risk the life that you want, the one that God wants for you, to hold on to the safety of the life that you have, the familiarity of the life that you have? The idea, obviously, is to face your fears. Like, what are you afraid of? What would you do tomorrow if you weren't afraid? In the verses that follow, Rahab, like in verse 9, she's going to use fear words. In verse 11, she's going to use fear phrases. But by the time you get to the New Testament, it says nothing about her fear and everything about her faith, which destroys what we think we know about heroism. We imagine that heroes feel no fear, but Rahab was scared out of her mind, so what gives? It must be that heroes do feel fear, but that they refuse to be controlled by it. Remember the most common command in the Bible, do not be afraid. That means that there is a way of being where though we feel fear like everyone else with a pulse, we refuse to be controlled by it. So imagine for you a life not controlled by fear, thoughts not constantly fueled by fear, future plans not continually formed in fear. To live heroically, we let go of the past, we face our fears, and finally we believe. Now we're really going to pick up our pace. Tighten up those belts because I'm going to floor it. Verse 8. Before they lay down, she came up to them on the roof and said to the men, I know that the Lord has given you the land, that the terror of you has fallen on us, and that all the inhabitants of the land are faint-hearted because of you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you, and you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the two kings of the Amorites who were on the other side of the Jordan, Sihon and Og, whom you utterly destroyed. And as soon as we heard these things, our hearts melted. Neither did there remain any more courage in anyone because of you. For the Lord your God, He is God in heaven above and on earth beneath. Now therefore I beg you, swear to me by the Lord, since I have shown you kindness, that you also will show kindness to my father's house, and give me a true token, and spare my father, mother, brothers, sisters, and all that they have, and deliver our lives from death. And we've got a little bit more to read, but super, super quick. Look at verse 11. I want you to see what Rahab said. She spoke of one God, singular. She spoke of a personal God when she referred to Him as, quote, your God. She spoke of an all-powerful, everywhere present at once God when she described Him as being, quote, in heaven above and on earth beneath, end quote. This is the language of faith. Rahab had come to believe, as evidenced by the act of faith that follows. So picking it up in verse 14. So the men answered her, our lives for yours. If none of you tell this business of ours, then it shall be when the Lord has given us the land, that we will deal kindly and truly with you. And then she let them down by a rope through the window, for her house was on the city wall. She dwelt on the wall. And she said to them, get to the mountain lest the pursuers meet you. Hide there 3 days until the pursuers have returned. Afterwards you may go your way. So the men said to her, we will be blameless of this oath of yours that you have made us swear, unless, when we come into the land, you bind this line of scarlet cord in the window through which you let us down, and unless you bring your father, mother, brothers, and all your father's household to your own home. So it shall be that whoever goes outside the doors of your house into the street, his blood shall be in his own head, and we will be guiltless. And whoever is with you in the house, his blood shall be on our head if the hand is laid on him. And if you tell this business of ours, then we will be free from your oath which you made us swear. And then she said, according to your words, so be it. She sent them away, they departed, and she bound the scarlet cord in the window. So notice, not once but twice in verse 15, it says that she lived on the wall. So I'm coming over here because, see, you and me, we're hanging out today, and we are on the approach to Jericho. So from where we stand, we can see the inner wall. We don't care about that. We're focused on the outer wall where Rahab lived. Now, I'm telling you, go home and check 3 sources. You'll get 3 different descriptions. But here's what it might look like. It could very well be that what we're looking at is like a 15-foot earthen retaining wall. And then on top of that, a 25-foot brick wall. So are you guys ready to make our approach? Let's, you and me, with our eyes on Rahab's window, let's come all the way over here. Wasn't that thoughtful of your church staff to put a prop up here to represent Rahab's window? That was so nice of you to go to all that trouble just for me. So we're looking up at Rahab's window. We can do the math. We're looking up like what, like 40 feet? Which raises a question. What in the world was Rahab doing with a 40 or 50-foot rope laying around the house? I mean, did everybody in Jericho keep a 50-footer in the coffee table? Did only people who live along the wall keep a rope on a hook by the window? I don't know. But I'm guessing these were not the first men to make a hasty escape from Rahab's place. Just throwing that little observation out there. She wasn't letting them go anywhere until she had a deal, which raises a better question than the rope question, as entertaining as that is, at least to me. And that is, why didn't she go with them? She could have led them to a cave in the hill country of Judah. Then when it was safe, she could have followed them back to Acacia Grove. What if they didn't come back? Or what if they came back but didn't keep the deal? Or what if before they could come back and keep the deal, she'd been found out? You know they would have killed her for sure if they'd known in Jericho what she was up to. Only one reason: her family. Except that reason isn't half as obvious as it seems. At least not when you consider the possibility, even the likelihood, that she and her family were estranged. They may not have even been on speaking terms. When you think about that, it's an amazing thing. Could Rahab live heroically? Not unless she believed. Not unless she believed in God. And we see her coming to faith in this very story. We've talked about it. Not unless she believed in herself, by which I mean that she believed in the woman that God was making her. And not unless she believed in the future, her future, the future that God was forming for her, but not for her alone. And see, that's the real kicker, right? Because when you think about it, Rahab had so many reasons not to care about anyone's future but her own. She'd been overlooked by the eligible bachelors of Jericho. She'd been used by immoral men from far and wide. She'd apparently been abandoned by her own family. Who would blame her for wanting to get out and never come back? It's what I would have done. Maybe it's what you would have done. But the idea is to believe God for a big future that makes us and others bigger. Don't we love talking about the future as Christians? We've got books about vision. Churches have a vision week, like a vision Wednesday, a vision Sunday. We love it. We talk about having a God-given dream. So here's the thing. If your God-given dream is only big enough for you, that's not God's dream for you. God's dream for you will always be so big that there's room in it for you and for others. And Rahab is the most amazing case in point. By the time you get to chapter 6, you discover that she was, in fact, she and her family were spared when the battle goes down. 2 verses later, we find out that when the book of Joshua was written, that she was alive and well and living as a part of their community. That's pretty awesome, right? Not half as awesome as this, because you get to the end of the Old Testament. And then you turn through those blank pages between the Testaments. And then you turn to the first book of the New Testament, and to the first chapter of the first book, and to the first verses of the first chapter. And there you find a tree, but not just any tree, a family tree. And not even just any family tree, it's Jesus' family tree. This tree is so amazing, I have to describe it. It has these huge branches that go off in every direction. And on each branch is carved the name of a woman or a man who lived heroically. And on one branch, for everyone to see, for me to see, for you to see this morning, R-A-H-A-B, Rahab. You know what that means, right? That means that not only had she become a part of their community, it means that she had fallen in love, that she had gotten married, that she had kids who had kids who had kids, until eventually one of her descendants was Jesus, God in the flesh, the Savior of the world, who many rightly see in the color of cord she was told to tie in the window. That scarlet cord, speaking of the blood that Jesus would one day shed on the cross to make all of these amazing things that we're talking about possible. Oh my goodness. I mean, clearly Rahab had an amazing ability to believe God for a bigger and better future, but do you think that even Rahab could have imagined this? From prostitute to mother. I mean, how long had she worn that label, prostitute? And God comes along and takes hold of the corner and listen, rip! And in its place, He puts a new label that says mother. You heard a little bit of Miranda's story this morning. My story is very similar. 10 years ago, pastoring Calvary Chapel in Austin, Texas, and my wife left me and our then 17-year-old daughter. It was just me and Lauren for her senior year until I sent her off to Bible college. And like Miranda, I lost everything. I lost my marriage, I lost my ministry, I lost my material things. I remember the day that I returned my car. I remember the day that I came home and found the foreclosure notice on the house of my door. And we know what it's like to live a labeled life, to see the way people look at you, to hear the way people talk about you, to live with those labels. Do you know that 10 years later, we still have people in our lives who won't ever let us forget? And God comes along and He takes hold of the corner of Miranda's divorce label. And listen, rip! And in its place, He puts a new label that says wife, my wife. And He comes along and takes hold of the corner of my divorce label. And listen, rip! And in its place, He puts a new label that says husband. What label do you need to see and hear God tearing from you today? Failure, rip! Loser, rip! Sinner, rip! What label do you need to see in its place? You know, in just a moment, I'm going to pray, and Luke and the band will come back out to do a closing song. Before I say that prayer, can I suggest what you might do when you get home today? Isn't that thoughtful of me to plan your afternoon for you? See how I am? I want to suggest that when you get home today, you find a tattered old bath towel and a safety pin. And you wrap that towel around your shoulders and you pin it up tight, and you begin to live heroically as you let go of past guilt and hurt, as you face your fears, feeling them fully but refusing to be controlled by them, and as you believe God for a bigger, better future. For you, of course for you, but also for the people around you. Would you bow your head for a word of prayer, please? Father, thank you so much for answering our prayer, for being present with us, and for speaking to us. And Lord, even now, as the band makes their way to the stage, we look forward to responding to you with this worship song. For some, maybe the words to the song will be their response. For others of us, maybe it'll be prayers that we offer under our breath as those beside us are singing. But Lord, we do want to respond. And just as our heads are bowed, I want to speak to those of you here who might feel like Rahab felt, who might have felt like I have sometimes felt, like Miranda has sometimes felt. Have you ever felt like an outsider? Have you ever thought that maybe God's against you? Have you ever wondered if because of something you've done or something that's been done to you that there's no reason to feel hopeful about your future? This story just blows that up. In this story, God makes an insider of an outsider. He proves that he's for us and not against us. He proves that no matter what we've done or what's been done to us, that he can make something beautiful out of even the ugliest things in our lives. Can you believe him for that today? Father, I pray that you'll fill hearts with hope from one side of this auditorium to the other, from the front to the back, in Jesus' name. Amen. God bless you.